The New York Knicks may be in a little bit of trouble. They've been struggling against the best teams in the NBA, and we're going to talk about why that is, what I've noticed, and we're also going to talk about how things look for them going forward, strength of schedule. We're going to talk about the way that this team ranks out metrically. We're also going to talk about other previous champions, or at least one in this video, and compare it to that a little bit to see if this really matters to that degree, like it seems like it would. And we're also going to talk about just this team as a whole. So make sure you do subscribe, hit that thumbs up, and let me know in the comments down below what you guys think this means for this team. Is it something, nothing, or everything? Post down below. So to answer my question, I think it's something, right? Like, it obviously matters when you're up against the top teams in the league, the marquee, all that stuff. You want to win these games, and the report is, it's not really a report, but the news, the information is the Knicks are 0-7 against the top three teams in the league this season, which are the Cavs, Thunder, and Celtics, respectively. Obviously, that's something you want to win. But I would like to say that I don't think that this is everything, because when you get into a playoff setting and you're hyper-focused on one team, and you guys are making adjustments back and forth, I'm sure they would sneak out some wins. I think that doesn't mean that this team, just because they're 0-7 right now, that doesn't mean they can't go the distance. That doesn't mean anything like that. Do I think it's probable personally? No, I don't really think that they're going to get it done in terms of winning the championship. But if things break their way, who knows, right? Anything's possible, of course. I would still say I think the Cavs, Thunder, well, maybe not. I think they're probably kind of equivalent to the Cavs. I don't want to like talk down on them or anything like that. I think the Cavs are awesome. I just need to see them in the playoffs. But most notably, the Thunder and Celtics, right? I do think that those two are the most probable teams to come out with the championship at the end. But overall, though, the Knicks have been struggling this season against the best teams, and that's something that's been pretty well documented so far. So I wanted to go ahead and kind of move from here and talk about, firstly, while we talked about the Celtics, I wanted to kind of briefly just talk about this. And I'm sure that if you were to just chronicle this over the years, you would come up with a very big mixed bag of results of, oh, this team had a similar outcome to like the Knicks right now, where they're like 1-6 or 0-7 or whatever the Knicks ultimately wind up being later on in the season. I don't know if they have any more matchups, but I digress. I'm sure you would find that for some past champions. But I wanted to kind of just show Boston specifically, because they were the winners last year, and how they fared against the top three teams, which actually were all Western Conference teams. The Timberwolves, Nuggets, and Thunder were the top three teams, aside from Boston, who had the best record last year. Otherwise, it would be the Knicks and Bucks if you wanted to consider them, but I'm not going to. So Thunder, Nuggets, and Timberwolves on the season. So for the matchup against the Nuggets, they were 0-2 last year. For the matchup against the Thunder, they were 1-1, and they were 1-1 against the Timberwolves. So there's not as much of a sample there, because those are all West teams. They only played them a couple times. And then so if we wanted to consider the Knicks, I think they swept the Knicks last year. 4-1. They played them 5 times. 4-1. You want to consider the Bucks as well, just for the sake of the video. They were 2-2. So first thing I'll notice is that they're not 0-7. Like they actually got wins in most of these cases, if not all of them. So that's where things are a little bit different. But I will say that, like I said, I'm sure you can dig through this and maybe find a little bit of a mixed bag of the results overall. I don't know if that is, like I said, the most important thing, and it just completely eliminates them from any sort of contention or anything like that. Obviously, I wouldn't think that's the case, like I said earlier. Now, when we talk about the Knicks, one thing I'd like to say is that this seems kind of interesting, because they're extremely top-heavy, but the good news is that for them, for the most part this season, they've had great health from their main guys. I mean, Bridges, Brunson, Hart, Towns, Payne is in there, played 51 games. Anunoby's played 51. All those guys have played upwards of 50 games, and they've only played 57 or so games so far this season. So they've been really healthy with those guys. Where they've struggled is when you move to some of the other guys behind McBride, who's been mostly healthy. He's missed about 10 games, or hasn't played in 10 games, I guess. So they traded off Sims, I believe, at the deadline, and DeLon Wright's there. I believe he's the new addition, played 3 games. But then when you look at the other guys, and most notably Mitchell Robinson has still not played so far this season. He's a huge piece for that team and should really help them out overall. But a lot of their guys have just had a really big mixed bag. It's been a bit of a revolving door, but you'd have to think if your team is top heavy, you've got your 5 best players basically out there, then you would for the most part be good, or 4 of your 5 best players, out there at all times, you would mostly be good. I'd say your 5 best guys. Anyway, so that's one of the things I would like to notice about, or I'd like to point out that I noticed about them, is that they've had great production. And then you look at the statistics. I mean, Cat's having an all-star season. He's been amazing. 25 and 13, 3 assists, 1 steal, nearly a block. He's been awesome for them. Brunson still doing his thing, 26 points, 3 rebounds, 7.5 assists. Bridges, and this is where it got a little bit tricky for some of these guys, is like, what's the hierarchy afterwards? What do these guys kind of fall in line? Hart's been awesome. Like, he's 15-10. That's amazing. That's amazing. So they got great production. Bridges 17. You got okay production from Cam back there, just steady production. Anunoby 16 points, 4.5 rebounds. You got really good production from these guys. But above all else, like I said, it's just the backups for them have not really been there. And that's something that they've really, really struggled with so far on the season. And I wanted to show that the Knicks currently right now have a 20-10 home record, a 17-10 record on the road. But when you look at some of the advanced stuff for them overall, they have actually, in 3-point games, gone 5-1, so they've been winning those. In 10-point games, they're 23-13, but their cumulative record against teams above 500 is 11-14. Now, this is a stat that we brought up in the Nuggets video yesterday, and I said throughout that video with Trevor that I thought that that stat mattered, sure, but I don't know that it matters to the degree that you would think it does, because when you look at it, a lot of teams are kind of like 500 against the teams that are above 500, except, or like they're like maybe right around 500, a couple games above, couple games below. If they're a playoff team, right? Except for like a couple of teams at the very, very top, like Boston, the Thunder, the Cavs, like these teams. And again, back on the Cavs, they're 6 games ahead of Boston. Like, so you have to give them respect. I'm a little bit skeptical of them in the playoffs. That's what I would like to see. I think they can absolutely go the way. If you're a Cavs fan, you didn't like what I said earlier. I just, I think that I have a little bit more faith in the other teams, if that wasn't clear. But the Knicks are, below them probably. So anyway, they've been struggling against those teams, whereas the Cavs, like I said, 22-6, 20-10, the Knicks 11-14. That is not the biggest indicator, but it does matter, in that it actually highlights that they've been struggling against the best teams in the league, period. And so when we talk about the strength of schedule that they have remaining, they've actually got the 12th hardest schedule here, and they're going to face the Cavs twice. That's a lot of teams got to play the Cavs a couple times, or once or twice remaining, huh? So they got the Cavs twice, they got Boston once, so they're going to get 3 more opportunities against the teams they've been unable to beat so far. They're going to get 3 more opportunities. So 1 more against Boston, 2 more against the Cavs. Are they going 0-10? Are they going 0-10, or would like pride kick in? And do they sneak out a win or 2? I think that if you're the Knicks, you have to win one of those games at least against both teams, which means that last game against Boston, you need to win. You need to at least win one of those against Cleveland, just to show that you guys can do it. But again, in the playoffs, things could change. They got a matchup against the Grizzlies, the Lakers, the Bucks, 2 against, I was going to say Washington, but no, that's the Clippers. The logo just looks so different. I was like, why did that make me think of Washington? So they have the 12th hardest schedule remaining so far. So they have an opportunity to make some noise here. While, like I said, I think this is good for them to really catch a rhythm and really show what they can do, because they've been feasting on the easier teams, which is not their fault. You play who's ahead of you. All of the teams have feasted on the easy teams. Kind of is what it is. That's normally how the NBA goes. But I do think this will be a good test for them. And like I said, they've been struggling against these teams that fit this criteria. These are all above 500 teams, or at or above 500 teams anyway, that they're going to be facing and they're going to be matched up with. So I also noticed when you look at them advanced numbers wise, they're tied for the 3rd best offense in the league, which is only 0.4 behind Denver for the 2nd best offense. So they're scoring at a great clip. But when you look at the defense, that's where they've really, really struggled this year. They are falling all the way down to 20th on defense. Now, I once again, qualifier aside, like this 0.5 is the difference between them and the Hawks at 16. Like, it's not like it's a crazy amount of difference. That's a variable that you can overcome, right? But the 20th ranked defense historically is going to be really hard to overcome that and go up against top teams like Boston, who's, I believe, top 5 in both categories. Yeah, Boston's 3 and 5. The Cavs are number 1 in offense, and they are number 7 in defense. That's great. That's good enough to get it done. The Thunder are number 1 in defense by a decent margin, actually. And then the Thunder are number 5 in offense. That's kind of what they're up against here. They're running into a bit of a buzzsaw against these 3 teams specifically. Again, Cavs fans, I'm sorry. Okay, I already know I got killed. They're running into a bit of a buzzsaw against those 3 teams specifically, and so they're really struggling to deal with that because they don't have the ability to get stops. And I've also seen that when you look at the Knicks numbers here, in their losses, I thought this was really, really telling. One thing that really stood out to me was that the opponents are blisteringly hot here. Opponents' 3-point percentage in their 20 losses is 45%. On the same amount of attempts, they're just hotter. They're making 16 threes instead of 12 at a 45% clip. So, but again, in the wins, though, they're the same amount of attempts, basically 1.3 difference, but there's a 10% dip in percentage. 34 versus 44, basically 45. That is a huge, huge, huge gap. They are getting lit on fire when they lose a game. So that's one of the things that I've noticed here. And also, opponents are rebounding better versus them. These are the typical things that would swing games in a team's favor anyway. You could look at these types of things like turnovers and stuff like that. Those are the usual indicators. But the 3-point percentage was such a big disparity between wins and losses that, to me, I thought that really, really stood out. Now, you could do a bit more digging and see where these contested, etc. We're not going to really spend a ton of time digging into that, but they have been really getting blitzed overall. And here's the post All-Star break numbers for them. Opponents are on fire post All-Star break. They played 3 games. They went 1-2 in those games. Opponents are on fire. They're taking up to 43 attempts per game when you average it out. Opponents are shooting 42% on 43 attempts, which is amounting to 18 threes made per game. And that's just a lot. Opponents rebounding is up as well in the pre-All-Star break versus post-All-Star break by 8. That's just too much, right? So these things are really swinging things for them. And like I said, they've got the 12th hardest schedule remaining. It's going to be tough for the Knicks to overcome this. But back to the original point of them struggling against the top teams, I don't know if this is everything. Something, nothing, everything. I don't know if it's everything. I do think it's something. And I do think this is something they're going to have to overcome and show that they can do. So what do you guys think? Post down below. I'd love to hear from you.